Okay, we are recording. So again, thank you everyone for joining me. This is part 2 of my 2 professional development seminars required for my pageant duties. I know most of my audience is coming from pageantry, but along with the many pageant titles I've held over the years, I'm also a registered yoga teacher. I am certified as an integrative trauma coach and working on becoming an integrative trauma practitioner, and I am still in my psychiatry residency. So my main interest is very much in healing the mind and body when we experience traumas, and working in a toxic workplace can be a trauma that brings out the worst in us. So that is why this seminar's topic is on professional communication in stressful workplaces. So first, I'm not claiming to be an expert in professional communication. I am by no means a perfect communicator. I see effective communication as an ongoing learning experience. I have learned a lot, and I still have lots to learn, and I'm always open to lifelong learning. If we think we know it all, there's little room to grow. Obstacles come in when our ego gets in the way of seeing things. So it's great for us to always remain humble and open to more learning and growth. What I can say, though, is that I have experienced a toxic, stressful workplace that pushed me to my breaking point, destroyed my mental health, and I had to take time off work to heal what was diagnosed as system-induced trauma. And it was very difficult to communicate professionally and not emotionally in that context. So I'm here to share what I have learned through that journey about what works and doesn't work for maneuvering effective professional communication in stressful workplaces to enhance our professional development. I also approached the concept of this talk from the angle of rules. So I approached it from a spiritual and a rules angle, which can help anyone who is okay with following rules in general. Most of civilized society is structured by rules and guidelines in various forms. Taking this angle will hopefully be especially helpful for autistic individuals because I know people on the spectrum love concrete rules, and autistic people struggle with frequently being labeled unprofessional for crusading for justice in toxic workplaces without understanding neurotypical expectations of behaviors. On the other hand, if you are someone who is a bit of a rule breaker because you actually really hate rules, like if you have cluster B tendencies like narcissism, this talk might not help you. But again, this talk is also spiritual, largely. So if you're religious, depending on your beliefs, you might not agree with this, you might find it offensive, and the spiritual angle may not feel like it's the right fit for your particular situation. But I'm hoping that this is going to help somebody. So first, I want to emphasize that I am not teaching about basic professionalism skills here. I am leading this talk today under the belief that most people can communicate professionally in non-stressful workplaces that provide a positive, collaborative environment for their employees. It's pretty easy to be an effective communicator when everyone is communicating effectively with you, right? It's when people find themselves in toxic workplaces where other people are communicating immaturely and triggering us. That's when stress can lead to breakdowns in effective communication. When we are stressed, we may revert to deeply ingrained negative patterns of communication that could have been role modeled to us in the past. Then we are unintentionally contributing to the toxic environment, as well as undermining our own well-being with how we respond. So this kind of unprofessional communication could look like using abusive, overly emotional language while venting, demonstrating a hostile attitude or tone toward colleagues or sources of stress, gossiping about colleagues, whether that's true or not, making accusations outside of a formal report or complaint for investigation. So making accusations within those formal avenues is perfectly fine, but making accusations outside of those avenues would be considered unprofessional communication. Complaining frequently about work conditions outside of formal processes, oversharing personal information to defend or express a sense of victimhood, passive-aggressive behavior such as lying or shifting blame, not showing up reliably and ready to work, being late, unresponsive, having unexplained absences, not being fully present, all of that communicates disdain, or anything else that distracts people and makes it hard to do their jobs. And of course, as we talked about in the first presentation, narcissistic people can be quite unprofessional, but they can be pretty good at hiding it. And it can sometimes be their targets who end up looking more unprofessional because they're not as good at hiding it as narcissists are. So again, I talked about this in the other presentation, but this is an excellent article that covers toxic workplaces. It realistically points out the common experience of a toxic workplace and how challenging that is for anyone in this situation. It's worth the read. It's thewalrus.ca/toxic-work. So why not just leave if it's a toxic workplace? Well, it's not that easy. We can't always just leave a toxic environment. There could be contracts, limited job alternatives, family roots in a certain place, financial constraints, all sorts of things, some of which I talked about in the other presentation. So a suggested reading for this would be Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. So in this book, he talks about finding purpose in difficult environments, the completion of tasks, caring for another person, or finding meaning by facing suffering with dignity. So this is Viktor Frankl, if you don't know, he was in a concentration camp during the Holocaust, and so this is a book about his experiences. And in that book, he writes about decent people and indecent people existing in both the oppressing group and the oppressed group. So some prisoners even would torture other prisoners for personal gain. And he talks about the freedom of choice, even in severe suffering, to be decent or indecent. Now, your job environment may or may not feel as extreme as being a prisoner in a concentration camp, subjected to abuse by Nazi colleagues and a discriminating dictator employer. But if Viktor Frankl could find a way to find meaning and hope in his life in Nazi concentration camps, can't you find meaning in your toxic workplace? And don't get me wrong, I am not trying to minimize or invalidate anyone's experience of a stressful workplace. There have absolutely been many times when my toxic workplace made me feel psychologically like I was imprisoned by a narcissistic regime that wanted to kill me for being different. But even in the empty, ugly, desolate wasteland of despair that is my psychological concentration camp, there have been things in which I could find meaning, joy, and gratitude. So that book is a great book to look for inspiration by seeing how somebody was able to still be a great person, even through living as a prisoner of war during the Holocaust. Another suggested reading is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I did not personally love that book, but a lot of people do. And a lot of people find that it's very helpful. So I think it's worth the mention. And the focus is on recognizing the meaning of life in every moment of living and enjoying the present moment. Now, again, I talked about this in the other presentation about trauma. So the DSM-5 has a very rigid concept of trauma that it's officially defined as exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence. But a lot of trauma-focused mental health professionals tend to operate on a broader definition of trauma as any physically or psychologically painful experience that has negatively impacted how we see ourselves, others, or the world. So a toxic workplace can absolutely be a trauma, especially if you don't have the option to just leave. And many experiences can count as micro traumas, which can accumulate in a period of our life so much that this entire period becomes one large traumatic experience. Again, this may need professional treatment with an experienced trauma worker to process and heal that traumatic impact. But today we will focus on a broader spiritual approach to managing a toxic workplace. A great book that relates to this is Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. So I mentioned that yesterday. This book can be a real eye-opener for people on communication patterns from your parents or other role models in your past and how that continues to affect you when you are stressed out today. So how do we handle stressful situations with emotional maturity? Essentially, we need to find ways to cope with the trauma of the stressful workplace, while also dealing with the trauma of being taught emotionally immature communication patterns in the past. It's a big feat, and it can be a lot of work. It would be so much easier if you could just leave your toxic workplace and find a more positive place to work, right? Again, you can't always leave that easily, and maybe you shouldn't, because there can be a valuable lesson in staying and overcoming whatever is triggering you in that stressful environment. So you can change the narrative to mastery, not suffering. If we change that narrative and think of a toxic, stressful workplace as a challenge, that can be a gift that allows us to become our best selves. Life doesn't let us skip any lessons, and as Emiora said, the same lesson will appear in different forms until you learn to respond differently. This talk will enact a spiritual, yoga-based way of approaching the issues, following the idea that we are not human beings trying to be spiritual, we are spiritual beings trying to be human. The first caveat to this is that spirituality cannot bypass psychological wounds. The trauma of feeling trapped in a toxic workplace may still need professional therapeutic treatment. And the second caveat to this is that stressful workplaces may, in some cases, be worth reporting for investigation, even while trying to master communication in that environment. I am not here to victim blame. The culture of stressful and toxic workplaces must change, but expecting a culture to change is a big ask that will take a lot of time and effort, especially because anything related to the legal system or government, which may need to get involved to make big changes, is unbelievably slow. Like human rights complaints usually take more than 2 to 3 years to resolve. Lawsuits can take around 10 years, depending on the case. In the meantime, you probably still have to work, and you're probably miserable. So this talk is to go over how to be your best self in an environment that might bring out your worst. We can't change the outer world immediately. It will take time and a lot of effort and collaboration to make the world a better place. But we can change our inner world much more quickly than we can change the outer world, at least relatively speaking. Why see it as a gift? Communicating professionally in easy workplaces isn't a big deal. Anyone can do it. Communicating professionally in stressful workplaces is an impressive display of self-discipline and emotional maturity. When things go well in life, that is a joy that comes quickly and it can disappear just as quickly. But finding mastery over stressful situations means finding joy even when things are not going well, which is longer lasting. So in that sense, a toxic workplace could be the challenge you need to become a better version of yourself. It can bring out the worst in you, make you face your demons and deeply ingrained immature communication patterns so that you can recognize and overcome them. And this enhances your ability to communicate effectively in any stressful environment, with your family, a spouse, children, or anyone who's distressing you with their immaturity. If you choose to see this toxic environment as a gift, then you can become proud of yourself for communicating effectively, even if you're the only one acting like an adult. At the end of the day, you want to know that you're the bigger person. You can lead the way and inspire others to also communicate effectively, inspiring change in that environment. You can find the strength to spark investigations along those lines. If you are able to overcome the toxic workplace, see it as a gift and a challenge, and choose to find the strength to spark investigations that create positive change, as well as leading the way and inspiring others to communicate effectively, you have the potential to turn your toxic workplace into an ideal workplace. Healthy workplaces are led by several trauma-informed principles. They create an environment of predictability, safety, and trust. They invite conflicts to be addressed in a cohesive, restorative manner. They empower employees by encouraging their strengths. They provide choice and collaboration to address power imbalances. So they are invitational. They focus on choice, empowerment, agency, safety, and predictability. Workplaces led by trauma-informed principles have better outcomes for employees and therefore better work-related outcomes, like less absenteeism or presenteeism, fewer complaints, and more productivity. Trying to make the workplace an ideal workplace is, again, it's the long game. It'll take a while to get there. A place that might be a narcissistic institution or that has a lot of narcissists involved may be very hard to change. Again, that is why today we are focusing on changing our inner world faster than the outer world can change, but not dismissing the goal of changing the outer world entirely. In general, going through life seeing everything as an opportunity will get you riding those waves instead of drowning in the troughs. Think of Taylor Swift writing songs about her breakups and her many unfortunate experiences of being targeted in the industry. She found a way to turn difficult times into opportunities, to monetize what other people did to her through music. And that's pretty clever. Now, are there ways that you can sublimate your experiences, monetizing them, maybe writing your own songs or a book or a movie script? Can you use your experiences as learning opportunities that make you a good coach for people in similar circumstances? Or is there something else? What is the opportunity in your toxic workplace? There probably is one, so reflect on that. Our main focus for this talk, though, will be the yogi mindset. People suggest yoga for managing stress, but simply doing the poses is not enough. I can't tell you how many times I have been in the middle of yoga doing my poses perfectly, physically, and inside my head, I'm just ruminating on everything I'm angry about. I thought it was just me and my flaws, but then I shared this in a room full of yogis during a yoga teacher training, and the instructors laughed and said that is very, very common. Yoga is commonly taught in North America with the majority focus on the physical, and not much focus on the spiritual, philosophical, or psychological. But I did get that when I deepened my yoga practice through becoming a registered yoga teacher. So, in order to share the gift of knowledge, I'm sharing what I have learned about the yogi mindset. A good Buddhist proverb to keep in mind is, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And you can be in the eye of the storm and just watch it all pass, moment by moment. So that quote is from Dr. Kasim Al-Mashat. He was my laughter yoga teacher for many years, and he spent 6 months on a silent retreat, which sounded pretty awful, but was a great learning experience for him. So you can check out his TedX talk on that silent retreat. And Choice is the Last Human Freedom by Dr. Viktor Frankl. So Yamas and Niyamas, they are ethical rules. So here's that rule focus I mentioned we're going to focus on, or moral imperatives within yoga philosophy. We can look at this as like the yoga version of the 10 Commandments, because Christianity has some good guidelines for life, like don't steal, don't lie. But there are many things about Christianity that are controversial, and it can also be painful when we feel like God is not there for us anymore in the way that we have come to expect. Many Christians lose their way when they lose that connection to God and become less than kind people. So for people who have mixed feelings about the 10 Commandments, about Christianity or any religion, but still want guidelines for how to be in life, following these 10 rules of the yoga mindset can make you happier in life, with or without needing to worship any religious figures whatsoever, to bring you peace from within, regardless of the stressors of your life. And the Yamas and Niyamas are one of several reasons why yogis are capable of tolerating very painful environments with peace and contentment. So a suggested reading is The Yamas and Niyamas by Deborah Adele. I will frequently be quoting verbatim from this book without necessarily acknowledging every single quote, because this book has so heavily informed this presentation. Each chapter includes exercises to deepen your understanding and application of these guidelines in your life. So it's still a worthwhile read, even though I'll be going over a lot of the content in this presentation. Now, some of us may already be triggered by thinking about our toxic workplace. I personally find it very hard to stay emotionally regulated when anything reminds me about how I was treated in my toxic workplace, and my triggers are everywhere. You're not you when you're triggered. Survival mode is not you. Nobody is their true, authentic, best self when fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode gets triggered. So in order to settle our minds, souls, and bodies such that we can all connect with our true selves and be open-minded to the Yamas and Niyamas, I invite you all to join me in a loving kindness meditation. Perhaps by the end of this presentation, or after repeatedly practicing a loving kindness meditation, you may even be able to send love out to the people who hurt you. They hurt you because they don't have enough love inside of them. And if they are not radiating love toward others, do you really think that they're directing any love to themselves? It's a lot easier to love others than it is to love ourselves. That's true for the majority of humans. And if they are creating a toxic workplace, they are probably missing love, and that is why they treat you badly. So we're going to focus on this loving kindness meditation, and maybe by the end of it, you'll feel like you can even send love to them and let go of their nonsense behavior. Okay. So loving kindness meditation is a mindfulness-based meditation practice that helps us cultivate compassion, kindness, acceptance, and love for ourselves and others. Loving kindness is not dependent on anything. It is not conditional. It's simply a natural opening of the heart to yourself and to an ever-widening circle of others. Now, I invite you to begin by taking a moment to allow the body to settle into a comfortable position, either seated or lying down. Feeling where the body makes contact with the chair, cushion, floor, bed, or wherever you are, and seeing if you can sense into the support of the earth beneath you. You can choose to either close your eyes or keep them open with a soft gaze, whatever's most comfortable for you. Let your hands rest in your lap or alongside your body, allowing your spine to lengthen and your shoulders to soften. And when you are ready, taking a deep breath in through your nose and a long, slow breath out through your nose or mouth. One more like that, breathing in deeply to enliven the body, and exhaling deeply to relax the body. And now, letting your breath fall back into its natural rhythm without needing to change or deepen or lengthen the breath in any way. Just allowing the breath to flow however it flows, in through the nose and out through the nose or mouth. Each in-breath opening you up to awareness, each out-breath inviting you to soften and relax. Just noticing the feel of the breath coming in and the breath flowing out. When you're ready, see if you can bring to mind a person in your life who is easy to love. A person who, the moment you think about them, evokes feelings of warmth or happiness. This could be a relative, a friend, a spouse, a mentor, someone you don't have too complicated a relationship with. Or you can always choose a pet, a dog or a cat, a creature that is easy to feel love for. Let this person or pet come to mind. Hold an image of them in your mind's eye, sensing them, seeing them, feeling them in front of you. As you imagine them, notice how you're feeling inside. Maybe you notice feelings of warmth, or feel a smile forming on your face, or feel a sense of calm or expansiveness when you think of them. Whatever it is you're feeling, allow it to be felt. This is loving kindness. It is a natural feeling that's accessible to all of us at any moment, and one that you are touching into right now. And now, as you hold this loved one in your mind's eye, begin to wish them well. You may silently repeat after me the following phrases. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. You can use these words or come up with your own words. Have a sense of this loving kindness coming from you, emanating from you, and beginning to touch your loved one. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. You may direct these words of loving kindness to your dear one, or it may feel more natural to send your loving kindness through an image, or a color, or light, or through feeling, whatever arises for you. If you're using words or phrases, feel free to use whichever ones feel most meaningful to you. Silently repeating them over and over. Feel free to repeat after me. May you be free from stress and anxiety. May you be free from all fear. May you be joyful. May you live in peace. See if you can feel your well wishes emanating from you to your dear one, feeling how this connects you to them. And as you're sending out these words and feelings of loving kindness, check into yourself and see how you're feeling inside. What does sending this loving kindness to your loved one feel like? Do you feel warmth, happiness, a sense of tenderness or poignancy, perhaps? Noticing what arises inside you as you send these wishes of well-being to this being that you care about. And it may be that you're not noticing much of anything at all, or that you're feeling something else other than loving kindness. That is no problem. Just check into what it is you are feeling and explore that. This is a practice that plants seeds. And now, imagine that this loved one turns to you, holds you in their loving gaze, holds you in their heart, and begins to send loving kindness back to you. You sense and feel your loved one sending you the loving kindness phrases now. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. Or maybe you feel their loving kindness through images or color or light or a feeling. Imagining them close to you, feeling their presence and their care for you as they send you wishes for your well-being. Letting these feelings wash over you, allowing feelings of love and safety to grow in you. Knowing there is nothing you have to do to deserve these feelings and wishes, they are being given freely to you now, without condition. And if you can't connect to a sense of safety and warmth right now, that's fine too. Instead, perhaps seeing if you can connect to the meaning of the words themselves, and letting that be the focus. And now, and this isn't always easy, seeing if you can have these wishes for yourself. Seeing if you can offer yourself the very loving kindness you've offered and received from your dear one. Sending yourself care, being the recipient of your own loving kindness. Hearing yourself silently repeat to yourself, may I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live with ease. Spending some time offering yourself loving kindness and care through words or images or feelings or whatever resonates. And now, if it feels right, seeing if there are others in your life you'd like to extend these good wishes to. Family members, friends, coworkers, neighbors, people you pass in the street or in the store or places you go regularly. Silently directing loving kindness, phrases, or feelings to them. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. It might even be possible to expand your loving kindness further out to people you don't know at all, the people in your city, in your country, in all countries, all over the world, in all directions. May you be happy and healthy. May you have peace and ease. May you be safe and protected from all harm and danger. You could even imagine extending these wishes to include animals and plants, all life on our planet and beyond, including yourself, by silently repeating, may we all be happy and healthy. May we all be safe and protected. May we all live together in peace, ease, and happiness. Just imagine your loving kindness spreading to the farthest reaches, including all living beings and the earth itself. Sensing that whomever is touched by this loving kindness, yourself included, is changed. And now, as this loving kindness meditation comes to an end, taking time to feel what's been generated through your practice. Open-heartedness, love, care, kindness, or whatever else you're feeling in this moment. Notice the sensations and feelings that have arisen within you. Sit with them, open to them. And even if there have been difficult parts of this practice, knowing that seeds have been planted to increase your sense of connection and belonging. And when you are ready, begin to deepen your breath and bring some movement back into the body to reawaken it. Sensing that you have touched and been touched by loving kindness. And as you slowly allow your eyes to float open, perhaps setting the intention to continue to receive and share loving kindness as you move throughout your day and throughout your life. May we all experience safety, happiness, good health, ease, and joy. Okay, so you'll notice that during that loving kindness meditation, I didn't specifically say to send love out to the people who hurt you. But if you were able to send out love out to coworkers, maybe that crossed your mind. Maybe you were able to do it, maybe you weren't. That's okay, again, just planting seeds. Remember that you are full of so much love for yourself and other people, that people who have mistreated you, their emptiness can't even touch you. Okay, and now moving on to the Yamas, the social ethics. So we have Ahimsa, compassion, nonviolence, Satya, truthfulness, Asteya, non-stealing, Brahmacharya, moderation, Aparigraha, non-attachment. So that's going to be the first half, and the second half is the Niyamas, so the personal practices. That is Saucha, so purity and cleanliness, Santosha, contentment, Tapas, self-discipline, Svadhyaya, self-study, and Ishvara Pranidhana, surrender. Now that I've listed these 10 yamas and niyamas, we will go in depth with how each yogic guideline for life can apply specifically to professionalism in stressful workplaces. And again, this knowledge that I'm sharing is partially influenced by my yoga teacher training and partially influenced by my study of the book, Yamas and Niyamas by Deborah Adele. So we're starting off with Ahimsa. It is a basic tenet of many philosophies, from the Hippocratic Oath, first, do no harm, to Christianity, you shall not murder, to veganism, don't hurt animals. Taken to the extreme, Jainism is a religion where Jain ascetics sweep the ground before them to avoid injuring the most minuscule forms of life with their steps. So Jainism is actually quite beautiful in its way of cherishing the existence of every living being and every soul on our planet, recognizing that we are all connected and nobody's pain or death is insignificant, no matter how small the insect on the ground. Now, isn't that beautiful? Unfortunately, it is idealistic and not practical for everyday life, unless you live as a monk in a Jainist temple. So simply put, the idea is to live in harmony without harm to self or others as much as possible, with neither self-sacrifice and self-harm, nor self-aggrandizement or grandiose narcissism. Even if we are right on a particular topic, being correct does not excuse our responsibility to be kind. Attack mode to win arguments breaks down healthy communication. The point about harmony raises the topic of balance. When we spread ourselves thin, we are more at risk of violent thoughts. People who keep themselves in balance meet life from an inner place of harmony and automatically live in nonviolence. Our ability to be nonviolent to others is directly related to our ability to be nonviolent within ourselves. How we treat ourselves is how we treat those around us, and this is why self-love is so important. So if you are lighthearted and loving with yourself, others will feel at ease around you too. If we cannot be safe with ourselves, others cannot be safe with us, and the world will never feel like a safe place. Love is at the core of nonviolence, and it begins with self-love, with forgiveness, humor for imperfections, and accepting the fullness of the human experience. To quote a young Holocaust victim, Eddie Hillisum, ultimately, we have just one moral duty: to reclaim large areas of peace in ourselves, more and more peace, and to reflect it towards others. And the more peace there is in us, the more peace there will also be in our troubled world. Ahimsa refers to physical nonviolence, but it also refers to nonviolent communication and even nonviolent thoughts. Thinking, how can I judge you when this is just a reflection of what happened to you? The root of violence is fear, and mastering fear helps us master compassion. There is an important difference between fears that keep us alive and fears that keep us from living. Incorporating nonviolence in our way of being is a challenge to finding our greatest courage. In the workplace, applying ahimsa can look like kindness even to those who make us angry, imagining the motivations behind their behavior with generous assumptions. If you've just met someone new, it is much better for your psychological well-being and for your relationships if you assume the best of them. Everyone likes people who automatically assume the best of them more than anyone who automatically assumes the worst, especially if there has been no reason to assume the worst of someone yet. If you assume the worst of someone you barely know, you could end up with discrimination allegations, because where is that coming from? But making generous assumptions about people is very hard and perhaps impossible when those people have previously hurt you so much that they've left you traumatized. The nervous system wants to assume the worst from people who have already previously given you the worst to protect you from being harmed again. You might need trauma treatment and some kind of intervention to heal the relationship before you can make generous assumptions from people who already previously harmed you. In general, embodying the yama of ahimsa can be very difficult to do, in particular when we are feeling powerless in the workplace. Powerlessness leads to feeling trapped, frustrated, angry, depressed, victimized. In a powerless mindset, we forget how much choice we have. But we have a choice to take action, and we have a choice to change the story we are telling ourselves about our powerlessness. We can approach our feelings of powerlessness with curiosity, asking ourselves, what do I need to do to feel capable of handling this situation? We can remind ourselves of past times when we overcame challenging situations and try to find that feeling again. We can manage a feeling of powerlessness by doing three things: practicing gratitude for what we do have, despite the things we don't, trusting in the moment or trusting in a higher power, and thinking compassionately about others. We can change the narrative from a powerless story to a story of adventure, an adventure that challenges us to achieve personal growth so that we can become more powerful, not powerless. This is from an online training module in healthcare that I went through earlier this year. It is not specifically about the concept of ahimsa, but it does cover the components of compassion, which involves being loving, present, and connected with kindness, awareness, and common humanity. When applying compassion to your inner critic, how does the tone and content of your self-talk change? Think about that for a moment. And it is very hard, if not impossible, to embody those aspects of compassion when your trauma response is triggered. So when it is hard to be compassionate, give yourself a break and consider that maybe you need time and treatment to address whatever is triggering your trauma response of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn before you can hold yourself to the ideal standard of compassion. We cannot expect a nervous system to experience regulation when it is experiencing an unsafe situation. Dysregulation is the right response in an unsafe or unstable situation. As Viktor Frankl said, an abnormal response to an abnormal situation is normal. if we are experiencing judgment in the face of vulnerability, if we are facing conflict that interrupts our connection with someone, if we are facing grief, tragedy, or big life change, it makes sense for our system to feel dysregulated. We can't expect ourselves to feel present and safe and kind and connected in an environment that isn't safe. We can't expect others to look on the bright side or find the good when they are facing grief, loss, or a big life event. And we can't expect ourselves to never get pushed into stuckness, shut down, anger, anxiety, or fear in response to witnessing or experiencing shaming, judgment, dismissal, rejection, or even everyday stressors. Dysregulation is not a wrong response. And whether we are facing something chronic or just navigating the ups and downs of life, we can expect to experience dysregulation. The brain can't be at our baseline level of happiness when we're living with chronic stress, because all of the stress hormones of cortisol and adrenaline running through the body during that fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. Prolonged exposure to that state disrupts the balance of serotonin and dopamine, which are neurotransmitters that regulate mood. So if it's hard to feel happy, kind, and compassionate, that could be a sign of a chronically stressful situation, like a toxic workplace. Sometimes it's not about changing how we feel, because how we feel and respond might actually be a very appropriate response. Sometimes it's about finding pockets in our environment, situation, and support system that can shift to support our body in the process of it all. So rather than always focusing on shifting or changing the state of our nervous system, sometimes we may consider asking ourselves, what might I be able to change around me during this situation? What type of support do I have access to during this time? What are some things I can create space from while my system catches up? What boundaries might I be able to enforce to protect my body's activation cycle, so that trauma response? What can I bring into my experience to make things even 5% easier? The most important person to have compassion for is yourself and your needs before you can apply that compassion toward others. It's also important to know that not everyone will receive our compassion, our kindness in the same way, and that is okay. We don't need to see people as rude if they don't accept our kindness. Our judgments reflect what is important to us, and manners are indeed important. Yet how people respond to our good intentions is less a reflection of us and more a reflection of where they are at on their journey through life. And we can accept where they are at and let it go without taking it personally and without adding on judgments. Now we're going on to satya, truthfulness. So it is the yama that is most directly connected with ahimsa in a delicate yin and yang balance. Spiritual teacher Yogi Raj Achala said, you have to watch out for nice people. And that is because there is a distortion between nice and real. People who are nice are presenting an illusion, a cloak that hides lies. They hold the truth inside until they reach a breaking point. And then they become dangerously inappropriate. I've been there. Being real instead of being nice comes from a place where there is nothing to defend or manage. We may not always like realness, but realness is trustworthy. Carl Jung wrote, a lie would make no sense unless the truth was felt to be dangerous. Why do we lie? To spare people's feelings or to protect ourselves from not being liked? Suppressing our truth takes a lot of energy in the managing of the pretending. Truth rarely seems to ask the easier choice of us. Gandhi wrote in his autobiography that his life was an experiment with truth, not an experiment in compassion or nonviolence, but truth. That was Gandhi's statement. To quote Gandhi, but the victories of truth have never been won without risks. It is important to have honesty with others, to release our energy and not deprive others of learning opportunities based on their mistakes or their misperceptions. It's also important to have honesty with ourselves. In some ways, psychological distress and problem behaviors can come from defending against our true thoughts and feelings. Defense mechanisms protect people from anxiety-inducing thoughts and feelings related to internal conflicts and external stressors. In the workplace, this applying satya looks like confronting problems with bold integrity, not passively accepting them and pretending that they're not bothering you, not sweeping it under the rug, but confronting problems with bold integrity, making formal reports when necessary. Processing what we really mean before we say anything at all is another way to apply satya, to apply truthfulness. Sometimes the thing that comes out of our mouths is not the most honest thing, it's a defense mechanism. And phrasing anything we do say with compassion for its impact and removing any content that may be untrue or may be violent. The compassionate practice of ahimsa, nonviolence, keeps truthfulness from becoming a personal weapon. So I'll finish a satya by quoting from one of my yoga training classes. Remember to not sacrifice kindness in the name of truthfulness. According to the wisdom of the sages, it is better to remain silent than to speak a harsh or cruel truth. If we always take satya too literally, we can end up being insensitive and brash. Process your truth before speaking, so as to practice nonviolent communication and reduce the negative impact you might have on the listener. Remember that each time you speak to someone, you first set the tone for how the communication begins. Even our energy can say more than our words when we enter the room. So keeping in mind that not every situation requires your input, and sometimes being silent is better for your own emotional well-being, as long as it is not at the expense of truthfully sharing your needs when assertiveness is needed. Learn to identify the difference between speaking up assertively versus being confrontational versus opting out when nothing needs to be said. Now we're moving on to asteya, non-stealing. So that involves living with integrity, awareness that we can steal more than just possessions from people. What kind of things have been stolen from you by yourself or someone else that you choose not to steal from yourself or someone else from now on? That can be energy. That can be stealing somebody's time. That can be stealing somebody's personal space, stealing someone's credit, stealing someone's reputation, like gossip. Gossip would be stealing someone's reputation. That could be stealing happiness. So stealing happiness can look like one-upping someone when they share something they're excited about, or tearing them down with criticism. Anything where we take the focus from someone else and onto us, onto our own needs, and satisfying our insecurities, is stealing from their moment. Now, toddlers steal things simply because they want them. Adults are mature enough to recognize the impulse to steal and choose whether to act with compassion instead. Imagine what would happen if each time we took something, we gave something back. We should always endeavor to lift people up. When people spend time with us, do they feel happier because of us? Or do they feel like something precious was taken from them that they maybe can't quite put their finger on? What feeling do you want to leave people with? So in the workplace, applying asteya, non-stealing, looks like being punctual, respecting people's time, asking for consent before approaching someone with time-consuming or energy-draining tasks, maintaining concise communications, again, to not steal someone's time or energy, staying honest about the work we have done, and giving credit where credit is due, not stealing credit, and refraining from speaking harshly about people behind their backs, even if they hurt us. Speaking about people behind their backs is different from engaging in formal processes like formal complaints or investigations. If you have a problem with someone and it needs to be reported, report it. But try not to steal a person's opportunity to defend themselves from assumptions. If it's possible to discuss your concerns with someone directly before making a report, do that. But don't steal from a person's reputation by engaging in gossip if you're not planning on doing anything about it, or if your concerns don't warrant a formal process. Other people may do that all the time, but if you're here with me in this seminar, you want to know how to communicate professionally in a stressful environment. So rise above the gossip, because you are better than that, and you are not a thief. Next up is brahmacharya, moderation. So some people refer to this as walking with God, or intentional celibacy. Actual celibacy may not be necessary, but some people are better versions of themselves when they choose to be celibate and focus those energies elsewhere. And some people are worse versions of themselves when they don't have that outlet for their energies. Either way, the idea of brahmacharya is less about celibacy and more about being aware of sacredness in all our actions. Be attentive to each moment. Move into holiness or mindful appreciation of life's gifts. This is how we harness our creative energy and master our senses, leave the excess behind, and live within our own boundaries of enough rather than indulgence. Think about any time you have indulged to the point of overeating, so much that your body was in pain and you felt bloated and miserable. Or think about any time you overworked and you felt exhausted, or you overslept and you felt lethargic. There is misery in indulging in excess. And there is a godlike spiritual holiness in managing our lives with humble moderation, never taking more than we need from any opportunity. This requires us to be mindful of what the limit of enough really is, and how distasteful it feels when we have first stepped into excess, so we can manage that early. A Japanese Buddhist monk named Gensai said, "The point in life is to know what's enough." We can lead into excess with anything. A thirst that could easily be fulfilled with a glass of water can somehow get tied to memories and conditioning connected to emotional satisfaction or emotional disturbance. In that way, we become addicted to wanting more and more to satisfy the feelings associated with whatever thing. But it ends up going beyond a simple need to satisfy our thirst, because our minds create the need for the feeling of reward until we have made ourselves sick with too much water in our systems. I know many people, myself included, who have experienced an addiction to self-advocacy in the workplace, to an endless pursuit of justice or vengeance, have felt the absolute misery of this bottomless need that never gets fulfilled. It's important to learn to separate from real needs and from the mind's stories. Sometimes what we need is to sit with a strong emotion and simply feel it, because the only way to heal our emotions is to go through our emotions. The mind may trick us into thinking we need to do something else with that emotion to satisfy it with some sort of indulgent action. But those actions are distractions that can never make the emotions go away until we are willing to sit with the feeling and accept it. We must be fearless in facing our sadness, grief, and disappointments without needing to soothe them with an excess of seeking external validation through food, sex, praise, or the endless pursuit of justice. Overindulgence snuffs out the life force, like too many logs on a fire overpowers the fire. Practicing non-excess preserves and honors this life force within us, so that we can live with clarity and sacredness. Ultimately, the simple things in life bless us with happiness, not the excesses. When we see life as sacred and live with gratitude and wonder in our hearts, there's no need for excess. So in the workplace, practicing moderation could look like setting boundaries with ourselves and others to prevent overworking, or boundaries from endless pursuits of truth and justice in toxic workplaces. Know when you've done enough. Now we're going into aparigraha, so that is non-attachment. That means not becoming too attached to people, material possessions, or outcomes, because these attachments weigh us down and make life heavy and disappointing. Aparigraha, it can be understood as non-possessiveness, non-greed, non-clinging, non-coveting. It is essentially letting go. Too often in life, we seek some kind of permanence in our experiences. Yet, as Heraclitus said, the only constant in life is change. And when we are attached to the outcome of things never changing, we suffer. What if we could trust the changes in life like we trust the breath? What if we could take it all in and take in all the nourishment of the moment and then let it go fully, trusting that more nourishment will come? When we practice letting go of our attachments, we move toward freedom and enjoying the moments of life without the weight of expectation. What we possess possesses us. Let go of expectations, opinions, criticisms, disappointments. When we hold our breath too long, that action can become toxic. Trust life, exhale, and let go. Think about something that you're passionate about. Could be a hobby, could be your career, could be a person. Has that passion ever made you suffer? The Latin for passion is passio, which means to suffer. Learning to detach from expectations around our passions can help us enjoy without suffering. This doesn't mean we don't care. We let go of the clinging, not the enjoyment. The fewer attachments we carry, the more free we are to enjoy and engage with the moments life does offer us. The more we let go of our breath, the more room we have to take our next inhalation. A bird cannot hold its perch and fly freely. Can you identify a limiting belief that has significantly impacted your decisions and actions around something that you're passionate about? Are the words I, me, my, mine prominent in those limiting beliefs? The more we identify with our ego, the greater our suffering. In the workplace, applying non-attachment looks like having a strong work ethic that is not dependent on receiving external validation. Sometimes people won't appreciate the good work you do, but it's still important to get the work done. It can also look like not expecting community from colleagues. If it happens, great. But for a lot of people, work does not provide a sense of community, and feeling entitled and upset about that will not magically create workplace friendships. Letting go of disrespect to physical products of our work. As much as it is upsetting, what can you do once the disrespect has happened? Let it go. And accepting undesirable outcomes of work projects, reports, even investigations. Investigations can be undermined, like I talked about in the other presentation. And not working tirelessly to be understood by an environment determined to misunderstand. It is quite common, for example, for workplace investigations to be unable to prove allegations of a toxic workplace or discrimination or sexual harassment. This doesn't mean these things didn't happen. It means the system is innocent until proven guilty. And guilt can't always be proven, even when it's there, unless you were able to record as much as possible, like I talked about at the end of the other presentation. All we can do in those cases is tell ourselves that we did our best to improve the environment and not have our well-being depend on an attachment to expecting a favorable outcome. There's only so much we can do, and it's important to detach from expectations for your own well-being and also for your communication to remain professional. Now, there is the importance of consent that needs to be brought up. At the core of a lot of communication difficulties is the absence of consent. For example, giving unsolicited advice, unsolicited corrections, oversharing with people, trauma dumping on people. So consider the yamas that we just went over before communicating something without consent. Ahimsa, compassion. Is this kind? How might the recipient be impacted by my words? Satya, so truthfulness. Be honest with ourselves. What is the intention behind saying this? Asteya. Are we stealing somebody's time or happiness by sharing this? So with Asteya, ask yourself, is it really necessary to say what you want to say? Brahmacharya. Is this information provided in moderation or in excess? Anaparigraha. Are we attached to expecting a certain outcome from this? If you ask for consent from people before you tell them something they might not want to hear, and if you're genuinely comfortable with people declining to consent, you'll be surprised at how much more smoothly your communications go in all aspects of life, even outside of work. So think about those examples of unsolicited advice, unsolicited corrections, oversharing, trauma dumping within the context of those 5 yamas that I just went through. Always ask for consent before communications that might be unwanted. For example, can I suggest how to fix the source of your rant, or do you just want validation? Don't give unsolicited advice without asking first. Are you interested in feedback on the grammar of your poster? Someone may not want you to correct their grammar. They might just want you to tell them that they did a good job. Do you have time for me to tell you some things that have been on my mind? Be careful about oversharing. I want to get something off my chest. Would you be comfortable listening? There's more to the story. Are you okay with me sharing more, or should I stop? And going into trauma dumping, asking first, would it upset you if I share something traumatic that I've experienced? Because if you share something traumatic, it could traumatize the other person, the listener, a type of secondary trauma. And then you've put that on that person, and that person may then need to go through that in their own therapy. Being careful not to trauma dump on someone, especially if it's in an inappropriate context. For example, a parent should never trauma dump on a child. Trauma dumping is for therapy sessions, not for dumping onto children. And I would like to say something, but I'm looking for a certain type of response from you. Before I say more, do you think you could provide blank? Being honest about what you're looking for, being honest about your attachment to outcomes, and seeing if that's possible before you launch into a communication that may lead to frustration because of those attachments. And now let's think about privacy. Before sharing something personal, even with consent, ask yourself, do I know if this person is mature enough to hear it? Have I actually processed this and how I feel about it? Am I ready to share this, or do I need more time? Has this person been empathetic and understanding in the past? And am I comfortable if this person shares with someone else without my consent? And there are other things to reflect on before you share something personal. Compassion toward yourself involves giving yourself privacy. Okay, so following ahimsa by compassionately giving yourself privacy, and follow asteya by not stealing your right to privacy from yourself. Not everyone deserves to know your inner world. Learn the skill of discernment, building a relationship through time and trust before giving people access to your vulnerability. Create boundaries to avoid having your vulnerability weaponized against you. This is especially hard for people who had their boundaries violated repeatedly when they were growing up and never got the privacy they needed. People who have already had their private secrets weaponized against them as well. It's difficult to embody the concept of privacy. If you're feeling resentment towards someone, that is a sign that you need to set a boundary or have an unmet need. Boundaries are how you teach people to treat you. Give yourself the space to understand yourself, to explore what your unmet need is, and to find a way to safely meet that need for yourself before looking for understanding from others who may not be capable of meeting your needs. Release the idea that you need to over-explain or give answers to people. Some people just don't deserve your vulnerability. And I did talk about this a little bit more in the other presentation where we talked about how oversharing is a trauma response, especially when dealing with narcissists in the workplace. Sometimes we feel very strongly that we need to overshare in order to defend ourselves or humanize ourselves, especially if we're dealing with narcissists. As I talked about in part 1, surviving narcissists in the workplace, it is a common trauma response to overshare, especially if someone is feeling misunderstood and therefore scared or defensive. I've seen medical students in these situations complain that they feel an overpowering urge to do it, and they can't stop thinking about it until they do it. Unfortunately, especially when dealing with narcissists, some people just do not deserve that vulnerability, and it will not change anything if the receiving party is narcissistic. A sign of emotional intelligence is refusing to let feelings or impulsive urges dictate decisions. Feelings are electrical signals in the brain. We don't choose every sensation, but we are responsible for how we react. Children may act on any feelings they have, but as adults, we need to have a checkpoint before acting on feelings. Emotions are not always calls to action. They're usually cause for reflection. What are those feelings communicating to you about your unmet needs? How can you compassionately meet those needs in healthy ways without putting yourself in a more unsafe situation and violating your own rights to privacy? One way is to sit with your feelings. Emotions are temporary waves. When you sit with the emotions, they naturally dissipate over time. When you fight them and avoid difficult emotions, maybe by keeping yourself busy or taking action against the person causing you to feel a certain way or oversharing to them, you never give those emotions a chance to naturally dissipate. Follow those waves of emotions through the buildup, the crest, and the trough, letting those waves dissipate instead of staying in the peak. It's important to get better at regulating your emotions so that you can understand your emotions and not be overwhelmed by them, so you can clearly articulate your thoughts when appropriate without going overboard. That can look like, number one, becoming aware of the emotion. What's that? I want to take action because I'm feeling, what? Is it scared? Is it frustrated? What is the emotion? So name that emotion that you're feeling and accept that the emotion is there. This feeling is here and it's okay. Makes sense to feel that way in this situation. It's valid given what has happened. Get curious about the feeling. So reflect, where do I feel this in my body? When have I felt this way before? This can be hard for people on the spectrum because interoception can be hard. So emotions may not come with any physical feelings. It may just be an intellectual awareness of an emotion. Practice can help to improve that and help to find interoception. So get curious about that feeling. Where is it in the body? Is the heart racing? Are the shoulders tense? Is there pain anywhere? Is there discomfort in some place? Where is the tension and so on? And allow the feeling to release. Let out all the tears, the shakes, the huffs, and the sighs. That'll be a lot easier when you're in your body, taking a somatic approach and getting into your body and out of your head. Okay, now let's take a self-compassion break. Maybe you have begun to feel guilty for the mistakes you've made. Maybe you're feeling triggered about how others have treated you. So I invite you to join me in a little self-compassion meditation. When you are ready, you can invite a few deep breaths and let your body begin to settle. You can feel free to have your eyes open or closed and settle into the chair or wherever it is that you're sitting. With curiosity, bring to mind a situation in your life that is difficult or causing you stress. Call the situation to mind and give yourself permission to see if you can actually feel the stress and emotional discomfort in your body. As it feels right for you, see if you can be present with the sensations as they arise in your body as you're thinking about this situation in your life that is difficult or causing you stress. Settle into that feeling in your body. Once you've noticed that feeling where the tension is, where the pain is, discomfort, heat, heart racing, breathing, any of those kinds of things, now you can try saying to yourself, this is a moment of struggle or suffering. That's mindfulness. And you can also say to yourself things like, this hurts. Ouch. This is stress. Noticing what it is like to experience this feeling and acknowledging that it is unpleasant. Now you can start to say to yourself, suffering is a part of life. That's common humanity. Other things you could say to yourself are, other people feel this way, or I'm not alone. If you're in a toxic workplace, other people probably feel it too. You're not alone. You can also say to yourself, we all struggle in our lives. Or you can sense the interconnection of humanity. So the point of this one is not to minimize by saying, oh, everyone suffers, but to feel that common humanity, because that's a part of compassion. Humanity, common humanity. Now, if you would like, you can offer yourself a kind gesture of soothing touch by placing your hands over your heart or finding another gesture of choice. For example, a nice tight hug around yourself. Maybe squeezing your biceps up and down, squeezing your upper arms. This can be quite comforting, especially in a moment of high stress. Notice if you can feel the warmth of your hands and the gentle touch of your hands. And now you can try saying to yourself, may I be kind to myself. You can also ask yourself, what do I need to hear right now to express kindness to myself? Is there a phrase that speaks to you in your particular situation, such as, may I give myself the compassion that I need? May I learn to accept myself as I am? May I forgive myself? May I be strong? May I be patient with myself? Especially if you're feeling down about if you've struggled with professional communication, be patient with yourself. It is a practice that takes time. Now, you can practice this self-compassion break anytime, and hopefully it will help you to evoke those 3 aspects of self-compassion when you need it most. So acknowledging the moment is a moment of suffering, seeing that common humanity, and wishing yourself, well, may I be kind to myself. And if you have a hard time finding the words for yourself, imagine a dear friend or a loved one with this exact same problem or challenge that you have. What would you say to them? And why would that be different from what you say to yourself? Okay, so now we're moving on to the Niyamas. So I want to be careful in discussing saucha, that is purity and cleanliness. The idea of purity or cleanliness can be loaded for a lot of people. As I'll get into in a moment, every human being is already pure at the core, and the goal is to find and cherish that core. To be clear, I am not promoting purity culture, which is a patriarchal construct that can destroy women's lives and women's ability to embrace pleasure. Although, as we talked about in the Yama of moderation, the opposite extreme doesn't tend to bring people, male or female, genuine personal fulfillment in the long run either. Moderation is key. So no, the point of our first niyama of saucha is not to focus on purity culture. It is to focus on the idea of cleansing ourselves of our mistakes in the past, forgiving ourselves, and making a commitment to maintain a healthier approach to life. It's cleansing and purifying our bodies, thoughts, attitudes, words, actions, cleaning up our acts so we can be available to the qualities in life that we seek to have. It's purifying ourselves from the heaviness and clutter of toxins and distractions and so on. One way to purify our bodies is through the meditation, breath practices, and postures of yoga. One way to purify our thoughts and attitudes is through following the ethical system of yamas and niyamas. And this can then naturally lead us to purify our words and actions in turn. As you cleanse your mind of toxic thoughts and attitudes, it can be easier to be immaculate with your words, to pause and articulate what you're trying to say, like expressing a need directly, rather than dirtying it by masking a need behind complaints or insults. Practicing saucha is enhancing our integrity and being purely aligned to the present moment in our relationship with others, with the task at hand, and with ourselves. It is maintaining purity of what we intake into our minds and bodies, as well as what we share. So cleanliness of food and drink intake, but also what we read or listen to, and purifying our thoughts or comments like gossip. Gossip is not pure. The steps that people take to cleanse and purify themselves will look different for each person. It could be as simple as committing to increased exercise, a diet that is more plant-based and less processed, cleaning out closets and cluttered drawers, doing a digital detox, especially from social media, letting go of grudges, choosing to look at enemies with more compassion, and making generous assumptions about bad behavior. Some people like to go on silent retreats, where they do not speak for a week, or several weeks, or months, and they sit and they process their thoughts. To quote Buddha, "We are shaped by our thoughts, we become what we think, and when the mind is pure, joy follows like a shadow that never leaves." The ultimate goal of purifying ourselves is not to pass judgment, but to lighten the load that each person carries. It is better to not see a river as polluted, but to see a river as fundamentally pure while carrying pollution. Every person, every human being is already pure at the core, but we may carry a heavy load, and that load could be the toxins from an unhealthy diet, or the baggage of grudges and victimhood, or a home full of clutter, or something else. These things all weigh down the body, mind, and spirit, just like pollution weighs down a pure river. The idea of purity is to get rid of that heaviness so we have more of a lightness in our spirit. Sometimes it's not as easy as just letting go of things that weigh down our minds and spirits. Sometimes people need therapy, like trauma work, to let go of victimhood. And that is also part of the process of purifying and cleansing our minds of trauma. And to recap, toxic workplaces can be a trauma. So practicing saucha in the workplace can look like going to work rested and healthy, letting go of workplace grudges, focusing purely on work without distractions such as social media. How many people are guilty of looking at social media when they're at work? And ensuring our words to or about others are immaculate. Now moving on to santosha, contentment. Everything we do to seek future fulfillment interferes with our well-being. Paradoxically, practicing not seeking can bring calmness, gratitude, santosha. We have been conditioned, especially in Western society, to want what we don't have, to be envious of others who have something better, to get ready for the next thing, and to believe that we will be happy when we get whatever it is we are seeking. This takes away from the happiness of the present moment, which could be as simple as mindfully savoring the flavor of your coffee next to your workstation and feeling satisfied by that, instead of chugging that coffee and thinking bitterly about Jason in accounting who makes more money than you and has a Keurig of his own. When we expect the world to meet our needs, we look for external validation to bring us happiness. We could expect our partners to fulfill us, our jobs to meet our needs, and believe that success will solve all our problems. But when we succeed, we find ourselves playing this if-only game, because society has conditioned us to become addicted to wanting and expecting things to be different. As Oscar Wilde said, there are only two tragedies in life. One is not getting what one wants, and the other is getting it. What if we let go of expecting satisfaction to come from an external source and look inward to free up our minds to allow us to enjoy everything that the moment does offer instead of ruminating on what it doesn't? What privileges do we actually already have that someone else might enviously believe they need to feel contentment? Imagine that person's disappointment if they were to realize that you have what they want and yet you still are not happy and you still want something else. What will it take to be happy if we are always focused on the next best thing? So again, paradoxically, practicing not seeking can bring calmness, gratitude, contentment, santosha. Contentment is found in accepting and appreciating the moment, not dwelling in the future or the past. We are here to experience the moment. Again, going back to Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, if he could find contentment, even as a prisoner in a Nazi concentration camp, can't you? If we allow our emotional well-being to be dictated by the words or actions of others, or events outside our control, we give outside factors and toxic people so much power, while making ourselves powerless and helpless. Why give a toxic person your power? The most empowered thing you can do is not allow outside forces to determine your inside experience. As Voltaire said, the most important decision you make is to be in a good mood. And if people are looking to specifically bring you down, refusing to let that happen is a very powerful decision. Of course, some people may need medication or therapy to help them reach that good mood and contentment, and that is okay. It is easy to be content when everything is going well. But the real mastery of life is when we do whatever it takes to reach that calm center, where we can be in the eye of the storm and simply watch the storm raging around us while staying still and calm within ourselves. Grateful, content, grateful for what we have and our ability to not get swept up in the storm. And sometimes contentment means feeling a negative emotion and accepting this emotion. You may feel depressed, disappointed, impatient, angry, and so on. And that emotion is a valid and important experience that will allow the next happy emotion to feel noticeable by contrast. When we allow ourselves to experience our emotions, they naturally dissipate faster than fighting or avoiding them. And they bring valleys to our emotional experience that make the peaks actually feel like peaks instead of everything feeling flat. In other words, we can cultivate a sense of calmness and contentment even with the experience of negative emotions. In the workplace, this looks like focusing your energy on what you do enjoy in your work, like the work itself, or friendly chit-chat with colleagues or clients, or having a dependable income, or having a cozy workspace, whatever it is that brings you contentment, shifting the focus onto that. Next up in the Niyamas is tapas, so self-discipline. Discipline in the sense of mastery, not consequences, like self-mortification as punishment for our sins or to release the spirit from the bonds of the body. It is easy to have good character when things go our way, but who are we when we get dealt a bad card? This guideline invites us to purposefully refine our strength of character, challenging us to work through the heat or tapas of necessary change. So tapas literally translates to heat. We can think about wildfires in nature. They are terrible for sure. The beauty of nature destroyed by heat and reduced to ashes. But according to the National Geographic, many ecosystems benefit from periodic fires because they clear out dead organic material, and some plant and animal populations require the benefits fire brings to survive and reproduce. The heat of fire is necessary to spark change and allow for the sprouting of new life, both literally in nature and metaphorically in our own lives. The toxic workplace, the fire of that narcissist, like I talked about yesterday, keeping that fire suit on. The toxic workplace is the fire you may require to clear out dead organic material and bring forth new life in you. As William Feather said, if we don't discipline ourselves, the world will do it for us. Life gives us tasks that, should we succeed in mastering, grow us into the kind of people that life can trust with important things. We can mistake these tasks as a burden or as an opportunity to grow our compassion and our skills. We can see stressful situations as a gift that allows us to ascend to vibrating at a higher frequency, like being faced with villains in a video game that allow us to level up our strength and other attributes once we defeat them. The way most video games work, you can't level up your character if the game is barren of any difficult battles with villains. And actually, a game like that would be pretty boring because you're stuck at level 1 with nothing to do. So we seek out quests in order to level up. We can be inspired by the spiritual ascetics in India, strong yogis who will stay in extremely cold or extremely hot conditions for extended periods and remain calm, undisturbed by the experiences of the outside world as they stay rooted in being a calm center. Their extreme self-discipline can inspire us to also master our senses and master our ability to stay calm inside ourselves even when the outside world is unpleasant, unjust, toxic. In fact, that is a useful challenge to help lead us to mastery that we would not otherwise be able to achieve without an environment that tests our limits and requires us to find ways to rise above. As Paul Romer said, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. So in the workplace, this can look like maintaining a high standard of performance, repeatedly practicing cultivating calm and restraining our impulse to express strong emotions or communicate violently, even when we are provoked. As Deborah Adele said in her book, Yamas and Niyamas, it is the times of hopeless desperation that shape and mold us into someone of depth. So most importantly, self-discipline requires us to commit to constant practice of that which we are trying to practice and to master. Every human being falls down when learning to walk, but we keep getting back up and practicing walking again and again until eventually we are able to run. Moving on to svadhyaya, that is self-study. It is the pursuit of knowing ourselves, studying what drives and shapes us. Yogis say we suffer because we forget who we really are at our core. We are all divine, pure, and capable of goodness and greatness. Investigating the stories we tell ourselves, recognizing that those stories shape our lives, and releasing false, self-limiting perceptions imposed by our egos. How we describe the world and others is a reflection of us, our own minds. It's not necessarily a reflection of real truths about the world. According to Anais Nin, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. We project our belief systems as well as the things that we love, don't love, can't see, or can't yet accept about ourselves into our interpretations of the world. Every human being projects. In that sense, the world is your autobiography. What story do you want to tell? If we hide from ourselves, we have no control of the way the story unfolds, and we make our belief system into the model of reality. Our belief systems are not wrong or right, but they are constraining. When we identify with these constraints, we run on old habits and we consent to being less than who we really are. It's important to unpack belief systems and conditioning with humility so we can open the door to revelation, learning, and shifting the narrative to a story that truly aligns with the life we want to live. A powerful way to master anxiety is scripting, where you write about your current difficulties in life. And then instead of writing out your worst case scenario bad outcomes that you fear, you flip that completely on its head and write what happens next with Hollywood style or Disney style optimism on how everything will work out and you will be victorious in all of your goals. Make it very detailed so you can visualize all of it and focus on what you will do, even when outside factors make it hard, so that you will surmount obstacles and still achieve your goals. Inspire yourself with where your life is going. And every time you get caught up in worries, return to that script. Remember that you wrote your best possible future and you are capable of creating it. As Wayne Dyer said, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Cherokee folklore says that inside every human is a battle between two wolves. One wolf is dark, he is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. And one wolf is light. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The typical ending of this story is that the one that wins is the one you feed. Maybe a lot of us have already heard that. But the story doesn't actually end there. The story continues with the message that if you feed them right, they both win. Because if you only feed the light wolf, the dark wolf will hide around every corner, waiting for you to become distracted or weak, and then he will come back into the fight. But if you acknowledge the dark wolf, then you can recognize the useful qualities that lie behind his darkness, like tenacity, courage, fearlessness, a strong will, and great strategic thinking. You can keep them both by your side when you lovingly acknowledge and feed them both. And there will be no more internal struggle. Instead of this internal battle of dark and light, instead of battling each other, these wolves will both serve you in guiding you toward your future. So in the workplace, applying svadhyaya, self-study, looks like challenging our narratives about our limits to success or who we can and cannot get along with. Letting go of the need to be right and examining where that need for external validation comes from. And seeking therapy to enhance self-understanding and recognize our pure core. And again, the other things that I said about scripting. So writing a script about the best possible ways that things could turn out, reflecting on where those belief systems come from that have been constraining you. And the last niyama, Ishvara Pranidhana, surrender. So it is surrendering to a higher power, having faith that blank, whatever, wants the best for us. It is trusting that the universe or a higher power wants the best for us, which can relieve a lot of anxiety. What does the universe want from us? What did I gain from a bad experience? We can be so busy feeling cheated or victimized when life doesn't go the way we want it to, that we often miss a new opportunity that life is offering us in the moment. Recall from one of the first slides, the same lesson will appear in different forms until you learn to respond differently. So surrender means receiving each moment with an open heart, accepting a bad experience, and looking for the lesson in it. Life doesn't let us skip any lessons. Surrender asks us to be strong enough to engage each moment with integrity and at the same time soft enough to flow with the current of life. Rather than paddling upstream, surrendering to the underlying current, flowing with the river, enjoying the ride, and taking in the view on the way. Accepting that you're alive, whether you like it or not, so make the best of it. As we learn to stop fighting life, we can begin to act skillfully. Surrendering is needed to skillfully maneuver a raft through whitewater rapids, or to gracefully escape quicksand that threatens to pull us under the more we struggle. Although quicksand cannot actually drown people, it's an exaggerated, that's not the science, but that exaggerated imagery is useful as a metaphor. As we learn to let go of our rigidity and our need for control, we open up to a world of possibility that makes us lighter and more comfortable for the journey. So think about the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Applying this in the workplace looks like reframing conflict and losses as not being personal failures that we must fight against, but as lessons for personal growth that can guide us to succeed in the rest of our lives. It means doing our best to make change and letting go of what we cannot change. When we master the niyamas, we may notice that the days begin to feel lighter and easier. Work is more enjoyable. Our relationships are a little smoother. We may like ourselves more. We may realize that we need less than we previously thought. And we may have more fun just experiencing life once we learn to master the yamas and the niyamas. Disturbers of peace can become makers of peace, even if we ourselves have been the disturbers of peace, because the toxic workplace can bring out people's worst. So feel free to repeat after me as I go through St. Francis of Assisi's prayer, if you're comfortable. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. If this way of looking at life through the philosophy of yamas and niyamas was helpful to you, you may wish to deepen your spirituality by studying the other 6 of the 8 limbs of yoga. So there's yamas and niyamas, but there's also asanas, that's the physical postures of yoga. There's pranayama, breath control. There's pratyahara, turning inward. There's dharana, concentration. Dhyana, meditation. And samadhi, so peace with all living, I think I should say living beings. And coming back to this idea of being the bigger person, as I mentioned in one of the earlier slides, being the bigger person at work allows you to lead with authenticity. It positions you as a more trustworthy authority. It helps you protect your peace. It may protect you from workplace toxicity getting to you. It helps you remain professional. And it challenges you to grow as a person. Being the bigger person isn't always comfortable, but it will have a positive impact on your personal and professional life. So if we want to do this by incorporating those yamas and niyamas, that can look like addressing workplace issues actively and constructively, being upfront and honest. Saying things like, let's take some time to come up with solutions. Let's first gather all the facts. Or again, making those formal complaints, launching investigations whenever that's needed. Speak kindly, assertively, clearly, directly, respectfully. I'm happy to talk with you about this calmly. Let's find some common ground. Being the bigger person means keeping lines of communication open and listening to other perspectives. Saying things like, please tell me your perspective. What's your opinion on this? What is the ideal thing that you think that we would get out of this? What am I misunderstanding about you? And taking a step back from heated situations, not taking it personally. Saying when you need to, I'm going to think about this and get back to you. I need to step back. And managing your emotions, as we talked about earlier, giving yourself time to process situations, to find maybe what the true feeling is underneath defensiveness that may be on the surface. And I think most importantly, apologizing sincerely when it's warranted. As I mentioned in the other presentation, narcissists almost never apologize. And a lot of people can't let things go because they haven't received apologies. Of course, it is possible to let things go, to process that trauma of whatever happened, even without an apology. But it sure makes things a lot easier for everyone if people do apologize. It makes it a lot easier to heal, let go, to move on, and to have a toxic workplace become a healthy workplace. I hope that focusing on spirituality during this talk has helped shift you away from the ego self and closer toward the ultimate self. A toxic workplace can push people into a defensive state of the ego self, and the ultimate self can turn that toxic workplace into an opportunity. So, takeaways. We want to be proud of who we are, how we communicate, and how we manage ourselves as professional adults, especially in toxic workplaces. We can let a toxic workplace destroy our well-being and lead us into unprofessional communication, or we can see it as an opportunity to cultivate a higher sense of self by seeing it as a challenge to enhance existing skills in managing our emotions and communication. We can vibrate at a higher frequency and be more mindful, improving our lives overall while still taking action to improve stressful workplaces. We can initiate formal complaints, reports, and investigations. We can make sure that we're always collecting evidence, like I talked about at the end of our last presentation, provided we don't let attachment to the outcome throw our calm center off balance. There's only so much we can do in systems that are fundamentally rigged, a lot of them. And we may need professional mental health treatment to help us recover from the real psychological damage that can be caused by toxic workplaces. And that is completely valid. Sometimes we go to therapy to deal with the people in our lives who really need to go to therapy, but we can't control what other people do. The only thing we can control is our inner experience and how that translates into behavior that leads us to being proud of ourselves. And when you make mistakes, which you will, and when associated setbacks come up, which they will, remember that this is part of the process. Don't beat yourself up too much if you make mistakes along the way. I've made a million mistakes when it comes to professionalism. I get very, very easily triggered when I think I'm experiencing narcissistic abuse. And that's why I shared this presentation with you all today, so you can learn from my mistakes the way I have. And I hope that we will all continue to keep learning from our mistakes, because to err is human. And here are the books that I mentioned earlier in this talk: Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, The Yamas and Niyamas by Deborah Adele. And I didn't mention these, but these are also powerful books. You Are the Placebo by Joe Dispenza, and Born to Create by my close friend, Tiffany Tajiri. She is a psychologist, and there's lots of great comparisons to Disney in there that can be, for the right person, it can be really influential. So people have questions. We finished earlier than yesterday since I didn't have any breakout rooms. So I can turn the recording off and answer some questions now. For people who don't want to ask questions in the chat, you can feel free to send me anything through the private contact form on my website for questions or coaching requests. But yeah, I will pause that recording now. And if anyone has any questions, now is the time.